Good evening, I'm Diana Sky, and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. The first direct talks between Ukraine and Russia in over 3 years concluded in Istanbul with little progress towards a ceasefire. This as European leaders ponder further support for Ukraine and Albania. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at the latest headlines. Romanians prepare to head to the polls in a high-stakes presidential runoff. And Poland gears up for a pivotal presidential election. And a Georgian mob is busted in Poland in a major state crackdown. Talks between Ukrainian and Russian delegations in Istanbul failed to make progress towards a ceasefire, with the reunited West placing the blame squarely at the feet of Vladimir Putin. Let's now go live to our correspondents Alex Kadzi, who is in Istanbul, Turkey, and Angela Skujins in Tirana, Albania, at the European Political Community Summit, where leaders also convened to discuss further support for Kyiv. Good evening to you both. Now, Alex, Angela, both of you have been following these developments and talks between world leaders. Alex, let's start with you. I mean, Vladimir Putin was absent from these talks. They lasted quite short, 2 hours. Were these prospective peace talks doomed before they even began? And what can we expect next?
Well, Diana, it certainly felt that way. These were supposed to be peace talks. At the very best, they were piecemeal. There was no clear progress towards that comprehensive and unconditional 30-day ceasefire that Ukraine had said was top of the agenda, that the United States had endorsed, that the European powers supporting Ukraine had also endorsed. The blame squarely at the feet of one man, Vladimir Putin, who did not come to engage with these peace talks at the highest level. That is, of course, from a European and Ukrainian perspective. We heard, of course, from that Ukrainian delegation led by Rustem Umerov, the defense minister of Ukraine. He was speaking with Sergei Kyslytsya, the deputy foreign minister of Ukraine. They expressed what they said they think should be the next steps in this process. Let's have a listen.
I think the next step would be that the leaders level meeting should be organized.
The pressure on the Russian Federation must continue. We should not really relax at this point. And there are many issues that can be resolved if only the leaders can meet. And given the nature of the Russian Federation, where practically every single issue that is at stake can only be resolved by President Putin, we are looking forward for having the summit sooner than later.
Well, more pressure is needed on the Russian Federation. That is the perspective from Ukraine. More pressure from their European allies. Certainly more pressure from the United States is wanted and perhaps essential in this process. Now, we know that European powers assembled in Tirana were discussing this, were expressing their frustration. It also begs the question, how long before those echoes of European discontent reach the ears of President Trump? We know that Sir Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom, Emmanuel Macron of France, Friedrich Merz of Germany, Prime Minister Donald Tusk of Poland and President Zelensky all spoke to President Trump after this meeting. That was recapped by Prime Minister Tusk at the meeting. Let's have a listen to what he said.
We met again after a few days in the same format. Together with President Zelensky, we spoke on the phone with President Trump to sum up the attempts at negotiations that began in Istanbul. The information was clear. The Russian side did not show goodwill. The Russian side did not intend to negotiate in the presence of the American side. The Russian side again set conditions that were absolutely unacceptable not only to Ukraine, but also to all of us.
Now, small elements of progress, nevertheless, behind the scenes. A prisoner exchange deal agreed between both sides. Russia will release 1,000 Ukrainian prisoners. Ukraine will release 1,000 Russian prisoners. It is something, but it is not peace. And clearly the message from Ukraine and European partners, more pressure is needed on Russia. And to get more from that reaction across Europe and from that meeting in Tirana, I want to bring in my colleague Angela Skujins, who is at the EPC meeting in Albania for us. Angie, you spoke to the exiled Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya exclusively about what needs to be done now. She is no stranger to Russian influence. What did she have to say
Alex,
to you?
So unfortunately, we're breaking up a little bit, but I'm going to do my best to stick to this broadcast. So Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, obviously an extremely important person in Belarus, was among those 47 heads of state, as well as those leaders that made an appearance at the European Political Community Summit in the Albanian capital. And while she told TVP World on the sidelines of this event that she wasn't surprised that Russian President Vladimir Putin didn't show up, she expects the allies of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to respond in kind in a language that Russian president understands. Let's take a listen to what she meant exactly.
We have to talk on the language of dictators, on the language of power. That's why I encourage democratic partners to show its teeth, to use the tools that you have, to counter dictators, like sanctions policy, policy of isolation, policy of pressure. This is what works with the dictators.
But condemnation was not the only flavour of the agenda today. We heard ratcheting up support from leaders such as UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, as well as German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, with both of these leaders promising to slap sanctions and further other consequences on the Kremlin for that Russian leader not showing up for that 30-day ceasefire proposal in Turkey. We also heard from the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen outlining the contours of the 18th sanctions package, which is meant to up the ante against Moscow so Russian President Vladimir Putin comes to the negotiating table properly. Let's take a listen to what she had to say at the plenary.
We want peace. And so we are working on a next set of sanctions. Main elements of this package will be, for example, sanctions on Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, further listing of vessels in the shadow fleet and lower the oil price cap, and more sanctions on Russia's financial sector, because we want peace and it is time to seriously engage on that.
Yes, so we're having a bit of technical difficulties here in the Albanian capital, but despite the turbulence in Turkey, as well as the no-shows from that Russian President Vladimir Putin, a wafer-thin silver lining that has materialized in Tirana is the collegiality, that support for that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who appeared today for those high-level talks. But to ensure that they do not repeat that no-show attitude, they need to come good on these sanctions, which really need the support of those international players, such as the US and Canada, to really bite as they are meant to. But that is all from me. I'll send it back to you in Warsaw.
A lot happening there, both in Istanbul and Tirana. Thank you so much, Alex Kadzi and Angela Skujins, for being with us. The race for Poland's presidency is entering the final stretch. With just 2 days to go, the top 3 contenders are making their closing pitches, and voters are preparing for a crucial first round this Sunday, May 18th. Now, the pivotal presidential vote could reshape the country's political future and its role in Europe. Kazimierz Łysiak gives us the details in this next report.
With the final days of the election campaigns coming to an end in Poland, the 3 top contenders are hoping to rally as much support as they can before Sunday's first round of voting. These are Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, the centrist frontrunner from the ruling coalition, historian Karol Nawrocki, backed by the largest conservative opposition party, and far-right Sławomir Mencen from the Confederation Party, who has utilized and fueled anti-Ukrainian sentiments. Trzaskowski, who has led every opinion poll since he threw his hat into the ring, represents a pro-EU, pro-NATO approach, with a strong emphasis on women's rights and abortion access.
Today, this is exactly what it is about, to be strong as a state, but also to be strong in the European Union. Because today the issue of security is on everyone's lips and in our hearts.
His biggest opponent, Karol Nawrocki, although claiming to be independent, is openly backed by the previously ruling Conservatives, the Law and Justice Party. He has a much more Eurosceptic attitude, hoping to mimic Donald Trump's campaign against the old world order.
As the president of the Polish state, I will make sure that Poland remains Poland. Stay with me.
Nationalist Sławomir Mencen is instead trying to paint himself as the alternative option to the two major camps in Poland, the ruling coalition and the Conservatives. While gaining popularity among youth due to his social media presence, some of his harsher rhetoric on abortion and Ukraine has so far prevented him from scoring higher than third in the polls.
It's not our business where exactly the new border between Russia and Ukraine will lie, or whether Crimea will be Russian or Ukrainian. If someone thinks differently, I'm very curious how they intend to enforce it.
But these are not the only candidates running in this election. In fact, there are as many as 13 of them. As Trzaskowski has just dipped below 30% support for the first time in pre-election polling, other candidates have noted small gains.
It's very normal that each political party that wants to strengthen its position on the political scene has its own candidate. In this case, in Poland, we have two political parties that united and they support Szymon Hołownia. However, all the other parties, they have their own representatives.
Most of these candidates with smaller support will prove crucial in the second round, which is to take place on June 1st. That's when the top two contenders will battle it out one-on-one, with more than 50% of the vote needed for a victory.
In the second round, there are only two candidates left. And then some votes, of course, some candidates, they sort of encourage their voters to give the votes to one of these two candidates.
This presidential election could be pivotal for the future of Poland and the region. The current ruling coalition, led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk, hopes to break the uncomfortable cohabitation deadlock with the current head of state, Andrzej Duda, an ally to the conservative Law and Justice Party. Rafał Trzaskowski's victory would guarantee close cooperation with the EU and NATO, while Eurosceptic Nawrocki or far-right Mencen would both bring a much more confrontational approach to Poland's international policies. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
Now, May 18 will also be a decisive day for Romania as the country heads into a presidential runoff. Now, this vote is a rerun of last December's annulled election, which was voided by the country's constitutional court. Now, our Balkans correspondent Paweł Trzaskowski is in Bucharest. Paweł, good evening. So now, this Sunday, Romanians will choose between hard right leader George Simeon and Bucharest mayor centrist Nicușor Dan. Now, it's the same day when Poles will cast their ballots, but I mean, the date is not the only thing we can say that both elections share. What more can you tell us?
Well, indeed, Diana, Polish and Romanian politics collided this weekend. It's not only about the date, as you rightly mentioned, but also about forming political alliances. And it all started with George Simeon, the leader of the right-wing Our Party and the winner of the first round of presidential elections, attending a rally of Karol Nawrocki, a candidate supported by Polish right-wing Law and the Justice Party, a show of support, a signal that both could form a political alliance of right-wing presidents if, of course, they are elected. Please listen.
The future president of Romania and the future president of Poland.
The unelected European bureaucrats tried to steal democracy in Romania. But Romanian people stood up for freedom like you stood up against communism.
And this endorsement was met with a response from the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who supported Nicușor Dan, a centrist independent candidate and mayor of Bucharest. And Donald Tusk did so in Romanian. Please listen.
Two mayors of our beautiful capitals, Bucharest and Warsaw, Nicușor Dan and Rafał Trzaskowski, will face the same threats: aggressive neighbors, foreign influence, anti-European populism, corruption and lies. It is apparent that you, the voters, and not foreign powers, are ones who must exclusively decide who will become president.
Nikusor Dan narrowly made it to the presidential runoff, getting half the votes of Georgia's Simeon. However, this week polls were released showing that both candidates are neck and neck. Some of the polls even giving Dan a slight lead. So you can imagine that the tensions are high here in Bucharest. Most recently, Georgia's Simeon called his opponent, quote, autistic, to which Dan responded that Simeon is nothing more but a Russian gazette. These are probably, though, the last heavy blows exchanged by both contenders, as Romania, similar to Poland, observes the institution of electoral silence, meaning that starting tomorrow, no campaigning is allowed until the last votes are cast on Sunday. Back to you, Diana.
Thank you so much, Paweł Trzaskowski, coming to us live from Bucharest. And now coming back to Poland, well, the country has taken down a suspected Georgian Mafia boss who entered the country on a fake passport and allegedly planned to carry out violent crimes. Now, the message from Warsaw is clear. He's just one part of an even broader crackdown on foreign criminal rings. Marek Steele has the story.
He came to Poland as a hitman. He was busted by Poland's security services, along with 6 other criminals from Georgia.
It started small, a car burglary on Nowogrodzka Street in downtown Warsaw. An unknown perpetrator stole a weapon and 46 pieces of ammunition. The police picked up the trail and kept following it. Eventually, it led them to the village of Nowy Konik in Minsk County. There they came across a group of Georgians.
The individuals were in Poland illegally, but one of them is of particular interest to Polish police.
We have evidence suggesting that one of the detainees is a high-ranking individual in the structures of the Georgian Mafia.
Polish authorities refer to the man as a wor w zakone, or thief in law, which in post-Soviet countries means a person who has a special status in the criminal underworld, a top dog.
There's actually a long history when it comes to Vori, or let's say Mafia hitmen from the east coming here because they can get paid better money.
7 weapons were found in the Georgians' hideout in the Warsaw suburbs. Authorities also found drugs as well as jamming systems used for thefts. Experts point to the severe brutality of some Georgian gangs.
In comparison, Polish mobsters were like the intellectual class. There is no mercy in the Georgian Mafia. There are killings and assaults.
On Wednesday, Poland said farewell to a group of 41 Georgians who, according to the security services, posed a threat to national security. This was the largest forced return of foreigners by air this year.
If you're looking at time, police budgets, threats, translation costs, and everything, if you have an option to deport these guys back to Georgia because let's say they're on a wanted list, and they very likely are, then yeah, deport them. I think that's actually the smart move.
After Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced a crackdown on foreign organized crime earlier this year, more than 3,000 foreigners, including nearly 600 Georgian citizens, have left Poland forcibly or voluntarily. Marek Steele, TVP World.
1,300 U.S. paratroopers descended over the Lithuanian skies as part of the Griffin Lightning 25 exercises. A powerful demonstration of NATO unity and military readiness comes at a time when the alliance's member states work together to strengthen coordination, capabilities, and deterrence to withstand open acts of provocation from Russia and Belarus. Our correspondent Zuzana Jurek was on the ground and has more.
Right now we are on the training ground in Lithuania where the Griffin Lightning 25 exercises are currently underway. These exercises, organized by NATO's multinational corps Northeast, aim to test out the operational readiness, speed of deployment as well as capabilities at which a multinational command would be able to operate in a simulated Article 5 environment. These exercises are multi-domain in scope, meaning that they include airborne, land as well as cyber exercises. And it is the earlier two which we are experiencing here today. In these exercises, the US, French, German, Dutch, as well as Italian air forces are participating, with the US command highlighting some of the key challenges which these exercises aim to identify, as well as to what extent they contribute to operational readiness and combat readiness of the Allied forces.
So exercises like this are perfect ways for NATO allies and the partners to rehearse deploying combat credible forces, not just here in Europe, but anywhere in the world. And that is rapidly, decisively, and as you saw here today, violently, if we need to.
These maneuvers, which were carried out, included tank combat simulations as well as paratrooper landings, with about 150 paratroopers participating in each pass. Today, about 1,300 paratroopers are expected to participate and conduct these exercises over the course of the day.
Griffin Lightning 25 and associated exercises are dedicated to present multinational Corps ability to conduct multi-domain and full-spectrum, large-spectrum operation in the Baltic State area of responsibility.
The overarching goal of these exercises is to ensure that the Allies take on the lessons learned from previous combat forces as well as from previous combat situations and apply them to how they manage their domains and doctrines as well as how they prepare for future combat situations. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Two pivotal presidential elections this Sunday, May 18, could shake up the heart of Europe. Now, in Poland, voters head to the polls in a high-stakes presidential race with 13 candidates and 3 clear frontrunners. And over in Romania, it's a tense runoff between a nationalist candidate and an independent centrist. Now, to unpack the stakes and what these parallel elections could mean for the EU, Ukraine, and the CEE region, I'm joined by Jan Zielonka, professor of politics at the University of Venice. Professor Zielonka has authored many books, and his research centers around international relations, comparative politics, and political theory. Professor, welcome to the program.
Good evening.
Now let's dive straight in. I mean, we're talking about 2 critical elections, Professor. Let's start with Poland. 13 candidates are on the ballot, but only 3 are polling strongly. Why is this election considered especially important for Poland's position in Europe and in our region?
Because victory of the mayor of Warsaw would make decision-making process of the state much smoother, because he is from the same party as the prime minister, and he will cooperate much more than the current president or the president who is from the opposition.
And what about Nawrocki? How would his vision look like? How would he differ?
He would probably behave like the current president, which has not cooperated with the government very much and vetoed a number of laws.
All right, let me ask you this. I mean, the first round there is on Sunday, but what can we expect to happen in the second round when only 2 candidates remain? Is this where the eliminated candidates would prove to be more significant? What happens then?
Yes, these 2 candidates are supported by the largest parties, and the final results will show whether observed in the studies of political society, the move to the center will indeed materialize. I believe those studies are serious, and they show that the Polish electorate has finished its romance with the far right. But only the second round can prove that. If this is so, Poland will have probably different government than Romania.
You did just mention Romania. Let me ask you this. Romania's election was, of course, preceded by a dramatic annulment and court rulings. Are there concerns in Poland about any electoral integrity, media fairness, or election day conduct?
Well, those concerns are always there. And elections are very contentious with a lot of artificial intelligence present, particularly in social media. And of course, there are various actors, including hostile ones, who try to intervene. But I don't think in Poland this would have much significance. Romania, it's difficult to say. As we know, the previous winner of the previous rounds of presidential elections was suspected to generate support externally driven. So there are the situations more complicated.
What about Ukraine? I mean, what role is the war in Ukraine playing in shaping voter sentiment in both Poland and Romania?
Well, officially, the current Polish government supports Ukraine, but this is more complicated because each time farmers or lorry drivers do not like transits via Poland of either grain or just lorries, the government is faced with the dilemma to side with local electorate or with Ukraine, and it has not gone always pro-Ukrainian way. In Romania, it's even more complicated because there is the current leader in the polls has made statements which would worry Ukrainians a lot, and I understand he's even persona non grata in Ukraine. We will see how those relations will shape up. If the prospective leader in the polls, which you can see now on the screen, indeed wins elections, he will, of course, will have to censor himself within the European Council, and he would somehow want to play a role which of outcast. He will try to achieve a success of Mrs. Meloni, who he sees as kind of a political ally, and she tries to balance her sympathy with President Trump with cooperations with Mrs. von der Leyen.
Professor, let me ask you this. I mean, of course, you talked about also George Simeon there. Now, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, he mocked right-wing presidential candidate Karol Nawrocki after George Simeon traveled to Poland to endorse Nawrocki ahead of the elections. Now, what Tusk wrote on Platform X, he said, Russia is happy. Now, my question to you, Professor, is Russia happy? And how is the Kremlin viewing these upcoming elections, both in Romania and in Poland?
Well, I don't have any contacts with the Kremlin, so I cannot verify this information that Russia is happy, if he means Russia by Kremlin. There's no doubt that Mr. Simeoni is more apologetic about Russian invasion in Ukraine than his opponent, mayor of Bucharest, Mr. Dan. But to which extent his rise to power is generated by Russia or welcomed by Russia, I'm unable to say.
And how do you think that if we look at the region more broadly, and in your view, Professor, but just very briefly, how do you think the outcomes of both elections might shape Central Europe's stance on Russia, NATO, and finally, of course, support for Ukraine? Just very briefly.
Well, I expect in Poland Mr. Trzaskowski to win the elections. And Poland is somewhat more important country also in relations to Ukraine than Romania. But of course, if Mr. Simeoni wins in Romania, Romania is a member of NATO, member of the European Union, and he will join ranks with a number of politicians to his liking, like Mr. Orban, Fico, or Mr. Meloni. So the split between sovereignists and liberals within European Union will persist and even intensify.
Thank you so much, Professor Jan Zielonka, Professor of Politics at the University of Venice, for all your insight here on World News Tonight.
Thank you.
And that's all for now for this edition of World News Tonight here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching, and do stay tuned with us for more news, features, and commentary here on TVP World.